He only wanted a hot cup of coffee. Instead, a veteran was mocked, dismissed, and sent back into the cold. What no one knew, the diner they laughed in was already his. 72 hours later, he walked back through that same door, not as a customer but as the owner. What happened inside those walls changed an entire town. Charlie Portman had walked farther that morning than most men half his age. His boots carried the weight of roads no map remembered. A backpack, patched with duct tape and faded from sun and rain, hung from one shoulder. He didn't move like a man lost, though. He moved with quiet purpose, each step measured, steady, as if he had walked this road in his mind 1,000 times before. Highway 42 stretched out behind him, a line of asphalt bordered by scrub pines and the hum of truck engines in the distance. When the neon sign for Miller's Diner flickered into view, a squat roadside cafe with chipped paint and a leaning flagpole out front, he paused. His hand brushed the brim of his cap, a faded army green with the outline of a unit insignia long rubbed away. He wasn't there for nostalgia, and certainly not for pity. What he wanted was simple: a cup of coffee, a moment of warmth, proof he still belonged in the world. Inside, the diner smelled of fried bacon and burnt grease. Vinyl booths lined the walls, their seams cracked and patched with tape. A jukebox sat silent in the corner, dust coating its chrome. Charlie stepped through the door and let it swing shut behind him, the bell above jingling once. Heads didn't turn. Truckers hunched over plates of eggs, and two cooks banged pans in the open kitchen. The cashier, Tiffany, was leaning against the counter, scrolling her phone. She couldn't have been more than 23, with dyed blonde hair and a voice that carried across the room. When Charlie approached, clearing his throat softly, she didn't look up right away. Only when his shadow stretched across the counter did she finally glance up, eyes flicking from his frayed jacket to the battered boots on his feet. "Yeah?" she said flatly. "Coffee," Charlie answered, voice low but steady. "Hot, if you've got it." Maybe it was the way he asked, plain, without smile or charm, that struck her wrong. Or maybe it was just a slow morning and she wanted to show off for the kitchen staff. Either way, Tiffany smirked, tilted her head toward the cooks, and called out loud enough for everyone to hear, "Guess we've got another homeless vet looking for freebies." The words hit the room like a dropped plate. The cooks in the back snickered. One of them, Robin, a lanky man with tattoos curling up his arms, let out a laugh sharp enough to sting. A trucker in the corner chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Charlie stood there, expression unchanged. He didn't flinch, didn't argue. He simply let the silence stretch until even Tiffany seemed faintly uncomfortable, though she covered it by scrolling her phone again. "You want a seat or something?" she muttered half-heartedly, though she didn't move to pour coffee. Charlie shook his head once. "No, thank you," he said softly. Then he turned, lifted the strap of his backpack higher onto his shoulder, and walked out. The bell jingled again as the door swung closed, cutting off the lingering laughter behind him. Out in the parking lot, he stood for a moment, gazing at the diner's peeling paint, the grease-stained sign above the windows, the flagpole where the banner hung limp in the still air. For a heartbeat, his expression shifted. Not anger, not embarrassment, but something quieter. A memory, maybe. A man's face, smiling from decades ago. Brian Miller. The man who had once pulled him out of a burning convoy in '71, or maybe the other way around, it hardly mattered. In war, debts like that blurred into brotherhood. Brian had built this place with his discharge pay, brick by brick, table by table. And Brian had left it all to Charlie when cancer took him. Charlie had come today just to see it, to feel the air inside before signing papers that already bore his name. He had wanted to slip in unnoticed, to taste a cup of coffee in his brother's house before deciding what to do with it. Now the choice was made for him. Charlie adjusted his pack and started walking down the road again, each step deliberate, his boots crunching gravel. The sting of humiliation didn't burn long. Soldiers learned long ago not to feed insults with anger. But the laughter? That stayed. Not because of pride, but because it echoed in the same walls where Brian's photo used to hang. That Charlie could not let stand. For the rest of the day, he walked the town's edges, stopping now and then to rest by the riverbank or beneath a sycamore tree. People passed him without notice. A jogger, a mother tugging her child. No one saw the veteran with silver hair tucked beneath a cap. No one asked why his boots were worn or where he was headed. And Charlie didn't need them to. He had seen enough of the world to know that dignity wasn't something handed out freely. You carried it yourself or you didn't have it at all. That evening, he found a quiet bench outside the courthouse and sat there with a folded envelope in his lap. Inside were the papers Brian's lawyer had given him. The deed, the signatures, the seal. Charlie stared at them a long while, the streetlights flickering to life around him, moths circling the glow. Finally, he slipped the envelope back into his pack and whispered, almost to himself, "All right, brother, I'll take it from here." The next morning, Miller's diner opened as usual. Tiffany joked with Robin about the old guy who wanted a handout. The laughter came easy again, as though it had never mattered. But beyond the edge of town, Charlie Portman rose at dawn, tightened the laces of his boots, and prepared for his return. Not as a man asking for coffee, but as the man who now owned every inch of that diner, and every second chance it might give. 3 days later, Miller's diner buzzed with the same rhythm it always had. Orders shouted across the counter, grease popping in pans, the jukebox sitting dead in the corner. Tiffany leaned against the register, painting her nails between customers. Robin flipped bacon with the lazy confidence of a man who'd done the same thing for years without ever expecting more. No one noticed the silver-haired figure stepping through the door until the bell chimed. Charlie Portman stood there, his backpack replaced by a neat jacket. His posture carried the same quiet strength, but this time there was no hesitation. He crossed the room as if he belonged to it, because in truth he did. "I'll need everyone's attention," Charlie said, his voice steady but carrying a weight that silenced even the clatter of pans. Tiffany blinked, straightening. Can I help you?" "You can," Charlie interrupted, pulling an envelope from inside his coat. He laid the papers flat on the counter. The diner's deed, signed, stamped, and sealed, his name inked at the bottom. Robin leaned over to read it, grease-stained hands frozen midair. "Wait, this says—" "It says," Charlie replied evenly, "that Miller's diner belongs to me now." For a moment, silence pressed against the walls. Tiffany's mouth opened, then shut again. Her cheeks flushed pink. Robin rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting anywhere but toward Charlie. Two truckers exchanged a glance. Charlie didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 3 days ago, I came here for a cup of coffee. What I got instead was a reminder of how quick we are to laugh at people we don't understand. I served this country, yes, but you don't owe me respect for that. Respect isn't about me. It's about whether you can face yourself tomorrow without regret. Robin let out a half-snort, defensive instinct rising. "So what now? You gonna fire us all?" Charlie's eyes rested on him, calm but unflinching. "No. If I'd wanted you gone, I wouldn't have unlocked the door this morning. I believe in second chances. Question is, do you?" The silence stretched, thicker than the smoke in the kitchen, pressing against every ear. Robin shifted, caught between pride and shame. Tiffany swallowed hard, fiddling with the edge of her apron. "I didn't know," she stammered, "about the will or about any of it." "You didn't have to know," Charlie said gently. "Decency doesn't require a backstory." Behind the counter, a waitress named Marcy, middle-aged, tired from years of double shifts, spoke up. "So you're the new boss then?" Charlie nodded. "That's right. And what's the plan?" Charlie scanned the room. The cracked booths, the peeling paint, the sagging ceiling tiles. He saw more than a diner, he saw a chance. "The plan," he said, "is to turn this place into what Brian always meant it to be, a home. For veterans, for truckers, for anyone looking for respect along with their meal." At Brian's name, a hush fell. Even Robin, who had never met the man, shifted uncomfortably. Everyone in town knew Brian Miller had been more than a diner owner. He'd been a decorated Vietnam vet, a stubborn fighter who believed no man should eat alone if he could help it. Tiffany's voice cracked through the silence, softer this time. I was out of line. The way I treated you. Charlie regarded her for a long moment. Acknowledging it is the first step. Now you decide what the next one is. She nodded quickly, cheeks burning. Robin crossed his arms. I've done my time, different kind. Guys like me don't get second chances. Just paychecks. Charlie stepped closer, his voice still calm. Then maybe it's time someone proved otherwise. Robin, usually quick with a comeback, found no words this time. The laughter from 3 days ago hung in the air like ash. Word of the ownership change spread through the small town faster than Charlie expected. Some customers were curious, others skeptical. A few muttered about the old guy trying to play hero, but veterans passing through began to stop, curious about the name above the door, remembering Brian's kindness from years past. Charlie spent the next hours in the back office, sifting through old ledgers and contracts. The numbers weren't good. Supplies overdue, bills stacking high, and margins so thin they might as well not exist. Brian had run the diner with heart, not with business sense. If Charlie was going to honor him, he'd need both. That evening, he gathered the staff again. Tiffany sat stiffly, hands folded, eyes downcast. Robin slouched in a chair, tapping restless fingers. Marcy leaned against the counter, watching carefully. This won't be easy, Charlie began. But I'm not here to tear the place down. I'm here to build it up. If you're willing to put in the work, you've got a place here. But it means change, starting with how we treat every soul who walks through that door. Robin exhaled, half a laugh, half a sigh. And if we're not willing? Charlie met his gaze. Then the door swings both ways. Marcy nodded slowly, surprising even herself. You know what? I'm in. This place has been circling the drain for years. Maybe it's time someone shook it up. Tiffany raised her hand slightly, voice tentative. Me too. I want to do better. I don't want to be that person anymore. Robin muttered something under his breath, but he didn't get up to leave. Charlie didn't press further. He knew battles weren't won in speeches. They were won in the days that followed, in choices made when no one was watching. He only gave them the chance. The rest would be up to them. As dusk settled outside, Charlie lingered at the flagpole, the stars and stripes limp against the evening air. He could almost hear Brian's voice, gruff, teasing, but full of conviction. You always did pick the harder road, Portman. Charlie smiled faintly. Somebody has to. The neon sign of Miller's Diner flickered behind him, buzzing faintly in the dark. After years adrift, the place finally had an owner who saw beyond profits, someone who recognized people worth saving. That belief, steady, stubborn, unshaken, was about to be tested in ways none of them yet imagined. The next week unfolded like a slow, steady march. Charlie arrived each morning before sunrise, unlocking the diner with the same ritualistic care as a soldier inspecting his gear. The staff followed with uncertain steps. Tiffany quieter now, Robin less smug, Marcy still steady but watchful. The air inside Miller's Diner was no longer weighed down by mockery, but it wasn't yet filled with hope either. It was a space in between, waiting to be shaped. Charlie's first act was not to scold or demand. It was to rebuild. He used his savings to reupholster booths, replace tiles, and paint over walls stained by decades of smoke and grease. He didn't hire contractors for every job. He pitched in himself, sanding counters until his palms ached, hammering nails with methodical precision. The staff watched, surprised. Here was the new owner, sleeves rolled up, working alongside them instead of barking orders. One morning, he made a quiet announcement. I'm bringing someone in for the kitchen, someone who knows food the way Brian wanted it made. That's how Henry Reynolds walked back into Miller's Diner. Once an army cook stationed in Kuwait, Henry had fallen on hard times after his discharge, drifting between shelters and odd jobs. His hair was streaked with gray, his uniform jacket threadbare, but his eyes lit up when he saw the familiar kitchen. I thought this place forgot me, he said, voice trembling. Not anymore, Charlie replied. I want you running the kitchen. Bring back the kind of meals that remind people of home. Henry's biscuits flaked at the touch. His gravy clung with warmth. His chili sent a spark across the tongue that drew truckers back for seconds. Plates came out with pride again, and customers noticed. Truckers who had once passed the place by began stopping deliberately, word spreading that Miller's was worth a detour. But Charlie knew good food wasn't enough. The books were a mess, and running a diner took more than heart and sweat. That's when Denise Walker appeared, widow of a Marine sergeant, known in town for her sharp head for numbers. She kept her household alive on scraps of shifts and long nights, raising 2 boys while the bills stacked higher than the cupboards. "I'm no charity case," she said firmly. "Neither am I," Charlie answered. "This isn't charity. It's trust." Denise took the job, and within days she had sorted unpaid invoices and renegotiated supplier contracts. The diner stopped bleeding money and began, slowly, to breathe again. Robin, meanwhile, wrestled with his own demons. The same friends who had once shared back-alley cigarettes and late-night schemes now laughed at him for playing house in a diner. They wanted him back in their circle, where quick cash came from shady deals. He stood at a crossroads, wiping counters while the smell of Henry's chili filled the air, wondering whether this second chance was worth the ridicule. Charlie never pressed him, but he watched with a veteran's eye, knowing battles of conscience were fought in silence long before they were won aloud. Tiffany's struggle was different. Guilt lingered in her every movement. She poured coffee with more care, smiled more often, but inside she carried the sting of her own cruelty. Charlie didn't lecture her, he simply let her work. The real turning point came when Eleanor, Charlie's wife, visited. Eleanor, a retired nurse with kind eyes and silver hair pinned neatly at the back, slipped into a booth one afternoon. She greeted Tiffany softly, asked her name, and began to talk, not about the diner, but about life. Tiffany, starved for guidance, found herself confessing things she hadn't admitted to anyone. Her aimless classes, her uncertainty about the future, her longing to be more than the girl behind a counter. "You've got hands meant to help," Eleanor told her gently. "Have you ever thought about elder care? Nursing? You've got patience in you. I can see it." Tiffany blinked back tears she didn't expect. That conversation lit a small, steady flame inside her, one that began guiding her toward night classes and new purpose. By the time October rolled in, Miller's Diner had changed. The booths were full more often than not. Truckers swapped stories over plates, while locals lingered for the company. On Thursday nights, a quiet ritual began. Veterans gathered, sitting in small clusters, sometimes sharing war stories, sometimes just the silence of men and women who understood each other without words. Charlie never made speeches. He simply poured coffee, listened, and nodded. That was enough. The town took notice. A local journalist stopped by, intrigued by the diner that turned itself around. She filmed Henry in the kitchen, Denise at her ledger, Tiffany refilling cups with newfound warmth. The segment aired on a Sunday evening, and within days donations trickled in. Charlie accepted some, enough to fix the leaking roof and patch the cracked parking lot. But he refused checks that came with strings attached. One donation he accepted gladly: lumber and labor from a local hardware store owner, himself a Navy vet. Together they built a small patio out back, with a sturdy flagpole and a polished plaque bearing the name Brian Miller. At the dedication, Charlie stood with his cap pressed to his chest, voice low but clear. "This isn't my place. This Brian's dream. I'm just keeping the lights on." The crowd, truckers, veterans, families, stood in silence, the flag lifting gently in the evening wind. Inside, the diner buzzed with new life. Robin stayed, still rough-edged but showing up each morning. Tiffany worked double shifts, her textbooks tucked under the counter for slow hours. Henry cooked with the pride of a man restored, and Denise kept the diner's heartbeat steady with balanced books and calm authority. For Charlie, it wasn't about profits or reputation. It was about the laughter that now filled the booths, the kind not born of mockery, but of fellowship. It was about the tired driver who found a warm plate waiting, the widow who no longer ate alone, the veteran who knew he'd be met with respect instead of suspicion. Miller's Diner was becoming more than a cafe. It was becoming a haven, And though Charlie never said it out loud, every time he locked up at night, he whispered a quiet promise to the memory of Brian Miller. "We're doing it, brother. We're building it right." Winter settled over Highway 42 with a brittle edge, mornings frosted in silver and nights sharp with cold. Yet inside Miller's diner, warmth had become its signature. The once cracked booths now carried the weight of full plates and fuller conversations. Truckers knew to time their routes so they could stop by. Veterans penciled Thursday evenings into their calendars, and families gathered without fear of judgment. What began as one man's inheritance had turned into something larger, a sanctuary stitched together with patience and second chances. But with growth came attention, and attention always drew friction. One gray morning, a city inspector walked in wearing a stiff suit and tighter expression. He carried a clipboard thick with zoning maps and compliance codes. Tiffany greeted him nervously. Offering coffee, he declined with a curt shake of his head. He made notes about the renovated booths, measured the distance between the kitchen and the dining floor, and frowned at the newly built patio with its flagpole. "This addition wasn't on the original permits," he said sharply. "Technically, it violates zoning requirements for commercial property on this stretch." Charlie listened in silence, hands folded, letting the man finish. He'd faced down more intimidating adversaries than paperwork, but he knew the weight of bureaucracy could crush a dream faster than bullets. Word spread by afternoon. By the next day, the diner was full not just of regulars but of neighbors and veterans ready to stand by Charlie. Henry served chili. Denise dug through records. Eleanor steadied Tiffany, and even Robin muttered, "They'd have to drag me out first." The inspector returned later that week, clipboard in hand. But when he saw the patio filled with veterans saluting the flag, truckers lined up in the lot, and families signing petitions at every table, his tone softened. "This isn't exactly what I expected," he admitted, adjusting his glasses. "This isn't a business at all. It's the town's table, and I'd be a fool to try and shut it down." Charlie only replied, "That's what it was always meant to be." The inspector closed his folder. "Consider the zoning dispute resolved." Relief washed through the room. Applause broke out, and Tiffany, cheeks flushed with pride instead of shame, hurried to pour coffee for the veterans nearest the counter. Robin clapped Henry on the shoulder, muttering something about sticking around a little longer. Denise exhaled, a rare smile crossing her face. As months passed, the diner's identity solidified. The Thursday gatherings grew into something ritualistic, veterans trading stories over coffee, sometimes laughing, sometimes falling silent as memories pressed too close. Younger patrons listened, realizing history wasn't confined to textbooks but lived in the voices of those seated just across the booth. A local paper ran another feature, dubbing it the Diner of Second Chances. Donations swelled again, but Charlie refused to expand beyond the diner's modest footprint. "Growth isn't about size," he told Denise one evening. "It's about depth, about roots." Tiffany, once the loudest voice of mockery, became the first to greet every veteran who stepped through the door. She saved her tips for textbooks, slowly carving a path toward elder care classes. Eleanor kept mentoring her, sometimes over pie at a corner booth, reminding her that compassion wasn't just a job skill. It was a calling. Robin surprised even himself. Though his past still tugged at him, the diner gave him purpose, a reason to rise each morning. One evening, after a late shift, he lingered by the flagpole, staring at Brian Miller's plaque. "Guess you saved me too, old man," he muttered, the words catching in the cold air. One spring afternoon, as the flag rippled against a clear sky, Charlie stood outside watching truckers rumble in and families unload from minivans. His hands were still rough, his back still stiff from years of labor, but his eyes carried a quiet light. "This isn't mine," he told Eleanor softly, motioning toward the bustling diner. "It belongs to them, to everyone who needed a place where dignity wasn't questioned." Eleanor slipped her arm through his. "And to Brian," she said. "And to Brian," Charlie agreed. He looked through the window at Tiffany laughing with a customer, at Robin sliding plates down the counter, at Henry stirring a pot with careful pride. Denise stood in the corner, balancing books with the sharp focus that kept the diner alive. Each of them had been given a chance, and each had chosen to honor it. That evening, as the last light bled into dusk, a veteran Charlie had never met stepped through the door. He was young, his uniform jacket still crisp, eyes hollow from recent tours. Tiffany met him first, smile wide, coffee already pouring. "Sit anywhere you like," she said warmly. Charlie watched from the corner booth. He didn't need thanks or recognition. He only needed this, the proof that respect could ripple outward, that laughter born of cruelty could be replaced by laughter born of belonging. The diner pulsed with second chances. For Charlie, that heartbeat was all that mattered. This story isn't just about a diner. It's about dignity, redemption, and the power of second chances. What would you have done if you were in Charlie's shoes that day? Would you have walked away or built something greater? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touched you, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that remind us what truly matters. See you in the next video.